Now, across Texas, the issue is.
I'm Rudy Koski in Austin.
I'm Greg Grugan in Houston.
And I'm Stephen Dial in Dallas, and this is Texas, the issue is.
Governor Greg Abbott seems to have decided that Texas is big enough to take on China, and that may trigger a Texas-sized trade war with the communist superpower. Now, Governor Greg Abbott issued executive orders directing Texas authorities to track down and prosecute foreign government operatives who are harassing Texans. He also told state agencies to divest from any business group with direct ties to the Chinese government. Now, this action comes as a state House committee is expected to consider legislation in the upcoming session to crack down on foreign adversaries like China. I spoke to Houston Democrat Jim Wu. He was just elected chairman of the House Democrat caucus, and he praised the protective action by the governor, but he has concerns about possible unintended consequences.
The problem is when you pass these bills, when you make these statements without any kind of real context, without real explanation, my fear is that it's going to cause a rise in anti-Asian hate, that anti-Asian violence, where people will take it upon themselves to go find a little old lady in a parking lot or the bus or whatever it is and just take that into their own hands. And I think there needs to be a firmer statement by the governor, by all of the officials, that, hey, China is China. China has nothing to do with the Americans who are here, who are immigrants, who fled China.
This may be a pivot from the border. Now that the Republicans will be in charge, you can't just basically go down to the border and say, hey, you got to fix this. Now they've got to do a pivot, and you pivot to China.
Yeah, no, I think it is likely that this is a political maneuver. Now Trump and everyone else is in charge of the border, and the Republicans in charge of the border. They need to find a new boogeyman.
Are you worried that this could have a ripple effect in the private industry? Because there's a lot of business here in Texas that has manufacturing in China, that has ties to China.
If you just go down the Texas coast, you drive up and down, you will see all the petrochemical plants that were built by Chinese companies in Texas. And those are thousands and thousands of high-paying jobs. And there's just billions upon billions invested in Texas by Chinese companies because there's reflective investments in China by Texas companies.
Should we be doing business with them? Why not shut it down?
I think at a more basic level, if we're saying we need to try to cool things down, we need to step away from threats of war, threats of retaliation, and all these things, we need to do more business together. We need to have more cultural exchanges. We need to have more people-to-people contact.
But if these companies have direct ties with the Chinese government and their adversaries, how can you trust them?
If we can't do business with anybody from China, fine, then just say so. Then let's go ahead and shut down Walmart. Let's go ahead and shut down Target. Let's go ahead and shut down all this different trade we have. They're all companies that are based in China. If you look at your vehicle, most of your parts, a lot of the plastic, the seats, and everything is produced in China. So are we going to say like, well, we're not going to buy American cars either because some of their parts came from China? Where does this end? And that's kind of that's more the pragmatic question is, if there are issues, can we address the issues without blowing up the apple cart?
Right. If you're gonna go cold turkey, you better have a plan.
During the pandemic, we talked about like, hey, where are all our surgical masks? Where are all our respirators? Where are all our stuff? Well, it's built in China. I mean, they're American companies, but they're built in China. So until you can unwind all of those things, like, to start this basically attempt to start a trade war from a state level, I think is kind of insane, right? And there are ways we can address the threat that they pose. We can address the security issues. We can address the harassment of our citizens without like just basically making everyone's daily lives just an utter misery, because food prices, all prices will skyrocket immediately. And much of the fact is we simply do not produce many of those goods in the United States, period. So if people are okay either paying extremely outrageously high prices or just not having those items at all, then let's keep going down this path. But if we want to fix things, if we want things to be better, talking has always been better than not talking.
All right. Well, I'll quote Representative Wu from my word regarding that interview, and that word is boogeyman. Greg, give me a word.
Oh, Rudy, I was going to go with hyperbolic, but decided instead on preemptive.
Stephen, you have a word, and if you do, give it to us.
Yeah, my word is simply strategy.
And with that, we're going to strategize. The Texas trio will be back. We're going to take a break, be back in a moment, discuss the possible Texas trade war with China. Welcome back. The state of Texas is taking on China. That's the issue for the Texas trio. Greg, there are a lot of Chinese Americans who live in Texas. So what are you hearing about this in the Houston area?
Rudy, other than Gene Wu's preemptive diatribe, I haven't heard much. And believe me, I have daily interactions with lots of Asian Texan friends at my gym. Here's my take. Immigrants from China are different than, say, immigrants from Germany in at least one critical way. That is, the German intelligence apparatus would never leverage their former citizens living here to spy for them by threatening their relatives back home. On the other hand, by all indications, the CCP has no such scruples, with the end justifying the means. And there is ample proof the CCP is already operating here, as evidenced by a highly respected university professor who tells me on his campus, many Chinese students won't even speak in class for fear other Chinese students will report their comments to intelligence operatives monitoring expatriate activities here in the U.S. So could Abbott's increased vigilance and generally harder line on Chinese government espionage trigger anti-Asian hate in the Lone Star State? I certainly hope not. On the flip side, for the governor to take no preemptive action would be naive at best and quite possibly disastrously negligent.
Stephen, in previous sessions, the legislature filed a bill that would prevent the ownership of Texas land by foreign adversaries, countries that are deemed as foreign adversaries. What are you hearing about all this in Dallas? Because it's coming back in this new session.
Right, it's a pivot, as you alluded to, in the package possibly by Governor Abbott. And so it would be interesting to see. I think we're still in the early stages of this, and I'll be interested in seeing what North Texas Representative Angie Chin Button says. Now, she is a big Abbott supporter, but I'm interested to see how vocal she will be about this. I think we're in the beginning phases of this. I don't know if it'll go to the extremes of anti-Asian American hate in Texas, but I think Governor Abbott probably needs to explain more of what his intent is before something maybe takes off with a different narrative.
Greg, nobody likes to see a trade war, but we do understand, the ramifications of it, and we do know our ties to foreign countries. Gene Wu's comparison to the pandemic, that seems to have some traction there. Don't you agree?
Yeah, sure it does. That weakness became painfully obvious during COVID, and we've had a couple of years now to address what amounts to a national security Achilles heel. So I genuinely hope we don't have to find out how much we have yet to accomplish. But also remember this, America is by leaps and bounds China's largest trading partner at well beyond $500 billion per year. If they hurt us, they also hurt themselves in terms of jobs, in terms of GDP. Frankly, it's a potential slugfest of economic giants which would produce no winners, just damage, and lots of it.
Stephen, you brought this up just a moment ago. I brought it up in my interview with the representative. Is this all about just pivoting away from the border since they've got to find a new boogeyman, right?
Right, it could be, because now all things will be solved on the border, right? And bouncing off of what Greg said, I know our time is wrapping up, is, you have to also look at President-elect Trump is talking about tariffs with China as a negotiation maybe. And so it might just be more than just Texas talking about China. We'll have to see what's coming from the top down.
Greg, what do you think? More saber rattling or pivoting?
Look, the uninterrupted flow of Chinese-made precursors for Mexican fentanyl has always been part of the border security crisis, as has been the large number of unaccompanied military-age Chinese males crossing the border without documentation.
All right, we'll end it there. You can see this interview or any of our past interviews by going to our YouTube pages.
And be sure and reach out on social media.
We are a month away from the legislature starting, and the speaker's race is heating up among the Republicans. Join us next week, same time, same place, and don't forget to let us know what you think the issue is.